cabinet. Now, the story none of the papers had, because it broke overnight, it's our breaking news this morning, is that Israel's war cabinet has approved the military occupation of Gaza City, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying the move will ensure Israel's security and create an alternative civil administration in Gaza. Let's now discuss that with former Conservative Special Advisor Salma Shah and writer Nels Abbey. Just to sort of the significance of this, Nels and Salma, this is, if you think about Gaza as we know it, there's about 2 million civilians. Of almost all of them are in Gaza City. So this is almost the final piece of Gaza that you could possibly have. And they already occupy 75%. This is what a lot of people will say, and the UN have already warned that this is going to lead to further catastrophe. The IDF chief himself has said that this is absolutely the wrong thing to do, and it'll only make things worse for the hostages. What is Netanyahu up to? If there's so many people against it, what is his game here, Salma?
I mean, I can't pretend to understand what's going on in his mind. Clearly, the logic that he's presenting is about total destruction of Hamas, which has been one of the aims, alongside, as he claims, bringing the hostages back, one of the aims of Israel's movement into Gaza. The huge problems around this are the fact that, you know, it doesn't feel like the criticism of Israel expanding into territory that doesn't belong to it starts to stand. Netanyahu has said that this is not about a permanent entry into Gaza City. It is about that war objective and that aim. But it becomes very difficult for the international community, I think, to be able to support this kind of move because, as you say, if even the IDF chief is saying that it's difficult, it does become or seemingly a reckless move.
Yeah, because what he's saying is that in the past, when they have recklessly got close to some tunnels and where hostages are in there, because they're now going to, they're now going to be everywhere across Gaza, is that they've then been murdered. The hostages have then been murdered. So he's saying you're actually putting hostages at further threat, not making them safer.
Look, I think lots of people have questioned, including the hostages' families in Israel, as to whether the objective of trying to rescue the hostages still stands. And I think that is reasonable criticism, especially if you're worried about bringing your family members home. I think that ultimately, though, what are we going to do and how are we going to step in when it comes to the fact that Hamas cannot lead a future in Gaza, nor can it, in the West Bank?
There is a 5-point plan, isn't there, around here?
Yeah, so just to, as you say, we don't know what's in Netanyahu's, I suppose, private thoughts, but what he said publicly about is that this plan has a 5-point objective, and you've mentioned 2 of them: the disarming of Hamas, the return of all the hostages, both living and dead, the demilitarization of the Gaza territory, Israeli security control of the Gaza territory, and then the establishment of an alternative civil administration that is neither Hamas or the Palestinian Authority. And he's mooted this sort of very vague phrase of an idea of sort of friendly Arabs who will pose no threat to us. But of course, underneath that, one wonders whether what it means is the moving in of Jewish settlers, as they have done in the West Bank. Because ultimately, if you're going to occupy, what is the ultimate objective? How in the minds of those on the right, far right, who are supporting this, how do you fully establish security for the Jewish state of Israel? Just to put more Jewish settlers in those places where Hamas once ruled. Surely that must be the ultimate objective, no?
Well, it would. Again, I can't predict. It's very, very difficult to understand what's going on in the mind of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the slightest bit. I think, broadly speaking, it's fairly widely accepted now this is a catastrophe of the most serious order, a humanitarian catastrophe that's been described by humanitarian organisations in the most stark of terms, in the most serious of terms that would normally land people in The Hague in very, very serious... I'm not... No hyperbole involved in that whatsoever. It's the most serious situations. The UN Special Committee itself described an unfolding famine taking place in Gaza quite recently. This, I believe, will actually only serve to broaden the catastrophe and actually make things significantly worse than they already are.
Nels, what does this say about sort of New World Order? People at home now, we have seen all of this play out on our mobile phones. That's what's so different about this.
It is, yeah.
We see it on our social media phones. But what people at home think, well, the grown-ups, the politicians around the world surely will do the right thing. And what does it say about the world order at the moment is that everybody's pretty much been saying this has to stop.
Yep.
But Netanyahu does pretty much the opposite, complete opposite, and he feels like he's going to get away with it. Is it because Donald Trump has given him a green pass? And does it come down to that? And it doesn't matter what Starmer says, doesn't matter what Macron says. In the end, if he's got the support of Trump, he can do what he likes?
It looks like the rules-based order actually didn't really apply to the West and our allies or so, that the rules-based order was only ever selectively applied. And once now we've reached the point where it looks like an ally of the West or so, Israel, is actually appears by many descriptions, including a pending case in the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, that they appear to be flagrantly violating international laws. But again, I think from a domestic perspective, also from a British perspective, I think that we should be very, very careful with how we... if I was a British politician, I would be thinking very, very much twice about how involved I would want to be in this or so, because I think this could be the unravelling of things. Because if the rules-based order is to mean anything, it's going to mean that people who commit atrocities such as this are going to have to be punished.
Can I just say, though, I mean, I do take a bit of umbrage with that, because it's not about enforcing what is there for the West and the Western allies. What we are talking about is the rules-based order that was created post-Second World War.
Absolutely.
And has so far brought peace and is now bringing a downturn into conflict because that rules-based order has been shaken. But it's not been by the West. You are talking about hostile state actors in the form of Putin and perhaps to some extent Netanyahu. And Netanyahu does not have the entirety of Israeli support either. So I think we have to be very careful.
And indeed, the families of those hostages took a boat where they were trying to, on loudspeakers, this was in the news yesterday, trying to get messages
we have the
through
pictures of this. This is incredible. They got onto the border, didn't they? The sea border there, and they are trying to get their family members freed. And they've labelled complete blame at Netanyahu, haven't they?
Yeah, and Israel remains a democratic state. You know, this is not like other state actors. No, but just let me finish the point.
Please.
It's that we are talking about what do we do as an international community. Keir Starmer, under lots of criticism, has said that he is going to recognise a Palestinian state. There is some aspect of this, because there was worries about the way Netanyahu and the War Cabinet would play this, there are concerns that one of the reasons that they might choose to go in at this point is before recognition of a Palestinian state. Israel has been incredibly critical of the UK. We could be losing our intelligence and security relationship with Israel, which is actually very important. And it does remain an ally because it is a democracy in the Middle East. So I think we have to be very, very careful that we don't paint a black and white picture around the geopolitical situation here, because it is not easy, it is not straightforward, and there are levels of complexity here that aren't just about identity.
Well, Should we just take a listen to what Netanyahu said in an interview? I think it was with Fox television. Let's just listen.
Will Israel take control of all of Gaza?
We intend to, in order to assure our security, remove Hamas there, enable the population to be free of Gaza, and to pass it to civilian governance. That is not Hamas and not anyone advocating the destruction of Israel.
It's interesting, is that it won't be Hamas. But, you know, it reminds me of when this horrible incident on October 7th took place, terror attack. It was disgusting. And I remember, fortuitously, 2 days later, I was in a taxi in Birmingham with a Palestinian man. And I asked him, and I felt it quite chilling at the time, but he said, look, wherever there's an occupation, there will be a resistance. And this idea of that it might get rid of Hamas, sure. But if you continue to occupy, and now the Gaza City, out of those 2 million people that occupy, do you not think some of them might say, well, we're going to start our own resistance? And they could be influenced by foreign parties. You don't end the problem. You create a bigger problem.
Look, you are always... the risk remains that Hamas, as with lots of terrorist organisations in the region, are proxies for other states. And so this rises above just a human people-to-people interaction. Because if you left it as a people-to-people interaction, the people of Palestine and the people of Israel would find means of getting on with each other. Yeah. OK, this is not just a question of that.
And it's worth noting, in his 5-point plan, there's no consideration of what the Palestinians want in this.
Yeah.
There's no thought that they can have any kind of autonomy.
It doesn't seem to be much consideration for whether or not for democracy, for them, for example.
We should move on, but I also just want to remind...
Let's point something out, just a final thing. The idea that you're a democracy and therefore it absolves you of any potential crimes that may have been committed in terms of actual actors of the state or the state itself is a fallacy. Democracies commit crimes, have done for
well, this is the point I was going to make.
It's not democracy. If you have crimes that are committed, they're done by individuals and they're done by organisations within democracy.
That's exactly what I said.
But
actors of the state
nobody said democracy absolves you. What I'm saying is that we require a balance.
You applied it, but yeah.
We require a balance in the way that
it's worth remembering, and a lot of the hostage families have pointed this out, that Netanyahu is simply saving his skin. He has himself postponed a corruption trial on himself. He's accused of very serious charges, taking £250,000 worth of luxury goods and items with his wife in return for political favours, and persuading and swaying the media coverage in his own country. These are really serious corruption charges.
But there is still support, and absolutely, but there is still serious support for Netanyahu's actions in Gaza and indeed some of the stuff that's happening in the West Bank, which people don't talk about enough.
Yeah.
No, I support the state of Israel. I believe in Israel's right to exist. I think post-Second World War and what was achieved because of a genocide against the Jews in Europe, the state of Israel is an important marker in our own humanity. But what I think is problematic about this is all those breaches post the 1967 war, all those borders are being breached, and we need to really consider that. But what pressure can the international community bring? It is limited.
We shall wait and see.
The concept of justice, also international justice, and the protection of human rights of people on all sides, particularly those less able to defend themselves, is absolutely paramount to everything. And I think as a state, as people, as British people, that should be our core principle that we should be upholding here.
Absolutely.
Beyond state national, I recognise the need for state-level allyship and everything else. But the core thing here is that there's certain things that we shouldn't be.
All right, we better move.
Let's move on to some of the front pages, which are focused on domestic issues and problems for Keir Starmer in the form of homelessness minister, or former homelessness minister, I should call her now, Rushanara Ali. It was on the front of the Eye yesterday that it had been discovered that she had had tenants. She evicted them. She then put the house up for sale for 6 months and then put it back on to rent at a much higher rental income. And that is within the current law. But the problem is that she is the homelessness minister who has been backing the Renters' Rights Bill, which is trying to overhaul that particular bit of the law, which then would stop people under the guise of trying to sell a house, evicting tenants and then putting up the rent, which is literally what she just did. So, I mean, hypocrisy is all the way through this, right? It was right for her to...
I mean, it's just the most appalling behaviour. And, you know, the Renters' Right Bill started off, actually, in the last Conservative government, and it's good that the Labour government has taken it on and wants to bring it forward. But it's not just that she's the homelessness minister. That's the department that is bringing the Renters' Right Bill forward.
But look...
It's not just a question of that she has to resign in her ministerial post. You know, why, if that's the manifesto that you stood on, why would you act in that way?
And to be clear, she didn't break the law, but she broke the spirit of the Renters' Bill, which she is bringing in.
But if you are bringing that law in, why would you hike up the prices?
It's just worth saying there's no suggestion she did it deliberately, and she, in her defence, has said that, and actually there is some logic to this. And let's just say she's got a place, it's currently rented out. She decides, I want to sell it. Anyone who's trying to sell a property, you don't know what it's worth until it goes on the market. Yeah. And you can know very quickly, actually, when you realise, oh, OK, no one's calling. You know, I need to drop the price down. That's going to take a while. OK, let's get renters back in. She's then got an agent that manages it. The agent could turn around and go, OK, if you're going to get people back in, actually, you could probably get a bit more than what they've agreed to pay 2 years ago, whenever it was. Oh, OK, then fine. There is a logic to that.
Yeah, but it wasn't 2 years ago. It was like 4 weeks prior to...
No, what I'm saying is that often you can put rents up, and every landlord does that. If on a new tenancy, you can, if you think that, well, actually, you were charging a probably low average in the rent. And just to point out, and I had to look this up because I spend most of my time in Birmingham, when I saw a 4-bedroom house rent for £3,500, £4,000, that's normal in London. For people outside of London, by the way, this is normal stuff, which I think is incredible in itself.
Was she right to quit then? I mean...
Yeah, absolutely.
The appearance of it made it untenable. There could be things that's underlying it. For example, she may have been paying the cost of my dear friend Kwasi Kwarteng, who was here yesterday or so, in terms of the actual mortgage hikes that means that her fix came to an end. Could have meant that her fix came to an end or so, and therefore she had to refix and price went up, or whatever it might be. The problem with it is that in today's media and today's social media and everything else, and given her role, the appearance of it, which based upon face value alone, it made it untenable for her.
Well, I think when she got the call from Starmer, it makes it untenable, basically.
Yeah, but it's so many things to explain, so many technicalities.
Yes.
It's just untenable.
No, I'm sorry. There are not technicalities here. You are a Labour politician. You are standing on a Labour manifesto that says it wants to bring in a renters' right bill. You know that you are trying to get rid of no-fault evictions. You know that you are out there as a party campaigning, saying these types of hikes that basically take profit rather than considering the rights of the tenants are wrong. But because it's within the law, it's done. You're right. It might be that it was done by the agents. She had no knowledge of it. Then my question would be, why don't you have knowledge of what's happening in your own property?
Particularly as an MP.
The agents should consult the landlord or landlady in this case. But look, the question is, this is a tricky situation, isn't it? It always comes up about what else are ministers doing outside of their portfolio. Should they be more transparent? Should we now be looking at other ministers across all parties to go, right...
Imagine they'll be looking at themselves this morning.
Exactly. How many properties have you got? What are you charging? Are you profiteering from your voters?
But that is transparent already. There is a register of members' interest. There's a register of
we don't know the detail, do we?
The register of ministers' interest.
It doesn't tell you the rental...
But you can look it up. But
it won't tell the detail of what rent they're charging.
That's fine, but that is not the concern, I think, of Parliament, what is happening in Parliament. The question is whether people are behaving appropriately, and you would naturally expect that.
You see a lot of people on social media, I'm surprised, a lot of people going, MPs shouldn't be landlords, or they shouldn't be profiteering. It is a grey area. If at one point you're standing, like you said, standing in Parliament, we've got to defend, renters, and we've got to look after renters.
Yeah,
but then you've got a £2 million portfolio of properties.
Don't you think that if that's what you're doing, that you shouldn't be doing something that's opposite to the thing that you're doing? I mean, that's the point of hypocrisy.
So what are we saying? We want politicians who've got no business now?
Right, but that's the point, isn't it? If you've got a rental property and you're renting it out and you decide to hack it up, then don't do the opposite and stand on a manifesto that says that's simple. It's really simple. Just don't pretend stuff. Yeah. It doesn't require any laws or more transparency or whatever. It's just like, get real.
But these are politicians. They pretend everything.
No.
I think that far too many politicians I've spoken to have always whispered to me that all politics contains an element of hypocrisy into it, somewhere in it with it too. The problem with this is that you can't effectively make people homeless whilst being the homelessness minister.
Yes.
So that's the issue.
She's now a ministerless homeless minister.
One of the stories on the front of the Times is really interesting. Single-sex spaces off limits to trans women. This, of course, is following the Supreme Court ruling in April, which said that women and sex must be defined in terms of biological sex, and therefore that is for the purposes of the Equality Act. It was essentially giving a final say on how we manage ourselves as a community in our public spaces around the transgender issue. And so there has been this EHRC sort of guidance which has come up, which is really just trying to flesh it out, because lots of people, schools, hospitals, leisure centres, cinemas, all our public spaces were like, well, what does this really mean? And so this guidance has come up, and it essentially says that, yes, you have to, in those spaces, say that under this new guidance, that if somebody who is biologically a particular sex, and they may well have to bring their birth certificate, which I find remarkable, that you would have to maybe bring your birth certificate to have to prove what biological sex you were, that you then have to use that particular facility for you.
But you're supposed to carry it around?
Well, I assume so, because the pressure is now on those staff to then challenge, isn't it? And to say, excuse me, I'm not sure you're using the right changing room, you're not using the right space.
Yeah.
Is this helpful? Because I suppose in those public spaces, ordinary members of the public who are just trying to do their job are faced with this issue.
Look, it's tricky, and that's exactly why there's this guidance.
It's actually not that tricky. But please, go ahead. Yeah. It's actually not. No, sorry, but please.
Go on, Salma.
So
give us your trickiness.
It's tricky for the people who are going to have to enforce this in those public spaces, as Ranveer has rightly said. And I think the question is always going to be around, you know, I was happy with the finding that the Equalities Act stands and its biological sex. That was very reassuring for me. But I do worry about how you actually treat transgender people and where they go and the respect that they should also be accorded, because it's not just a question, OK, we've established that there are single-sex spaces, but it does leave a group of people, you know, out there without any clear guidance. And what you don't want, just going back to that human-to-human level, is people being embarrassed or feeling uncomfortable because they don't know where to go.
Nels,
what to do.
untrick this one then.
Yeah, it's not tricky at all. So if I'm a business owner, OK, let's take, for example, this lovely arena that we're all speaking in right now. If you come out, the doors behind me, make your way to the left or so, not to go into too much detail, but there's 6 cubicles.
Yeah.
3 of them have the male sign, and 3 of them have the female sign in front of them. To solve a problem or so of single-sex spaces, you just get rid of those signs altogether, and all of them become just bars.
And they do that a lot in a lot of places now,
exactly,
don't they?
That's the direction of travel that we're going to go in. So if you're a business owner, you would be mad to open yourself up to potential...
But doesn't that
It's not always possible, but you think...
Where wouldn't it be possible?
Well, if you haven't got the space to do that.
No, you'd always have the space. If you have a toilet there, that's a space.
No, but you need to have the hand basin
I see what you mean,
in a contained cubicle, presumably, because the hand-washing area is also a private space.
Not particularly, no. If you go to private member clubs, if you go to practically any...
Sorry, you just gave away a little bit about your private... private members clubs.
If you go to any high-end... practically many new establishments
right.
that are open up right now,
yeah.
you probably have the actual bathrooms and you have the unisex hand washing space or so. And I think that's just a normal situation. That's the direction of travel that we're going to go in. So that's going to... So
but how do you deal with that in a leisure centre with communal changing? How would you deal with that in those kinds of sports facilities? It's like, it's not cut and dry. That's exactly why the guidance is there.
But it is.
There wouldn't be a huge row about it.
Just on the leisure centre thing, how do you get around that one then?
Well, OK, I go to a leisure centre. I go to a... Well, I'm not going to my normal
in your
gym.
private members.
I go to a leisure centre.
To that rooftop pool that you go to swim a few
Is it just in your basement? Have you just dug it out in your basement?
I go to a lovely new institution in Hackney called the Britannia, so the change rooms, everything else, you've got family change rooms, you've got other change rooms, so it's all unisex to the best of my knowledge, for the most part. So it's all unisex.
The changing rooms are unisex?
Yeah, so actually, I'll give you a perfect example. If you go to, there's another place I go to, Canary Wharf, or so, sauna.
How many places do you go to?
Do
you do any work?
I'm working right now. So there's a great place I go to somewhere in Canary Wharf. So
I feel like we're learning a bit too much.
You have the shared showers.
Are we imagining you in a sauna right now?
You have the shared shower. I'm just trying to point out the direction of travel this is going into right now. That what you're going to see with these rulings is the death of the single-sex space, in which people then share more common places where there can be commonalities, but where you need absolute privacy or so, you just all have them to yourself.
I think you're probably right, but maybe in sort of cosmopolitan cities. The thing is that I have to say, and a lot of people at home, we live in a bit of a bubble sometimes when you're down in London. When I come to London, you go to some of the northern towns, this is sort of, it's like, we're not doing that, mate. We're not doing it. There's the toilet and there's the other one. And that's the problem. You might get it in sort of trendy Canary Wharf or Hackney.
You get it on EasyJet. You get it on every coach that you might go to.
Do you know why, though? Because it's mandated and there's guidance. So it's not that simple, because you are asking, in big organisations, everybody to abide to a certain code, and that's why you have the guidance.
But the solution is to get rid of the single...
I just want to point out one of the problems, I think, with this guidance is that part of it says this: a legitimate aim for excluding a trans person from a separate or single-sex service for their own biological sex might be to prevent alarm or distress for other service users, i.e. a trans man might be excluded from the women-only service, which, legally speaking, they're meant to be using if they're a trans man because they're biologically a woman, right? So the law says use the women's bit. But if you present as a man which of course you would if you were a trans man, other service users could reasonably object to his presence. And it is proportionate means of achieving legitimate aim to exclude that person. I think that's quite problematic because that is still a human being.
Look,
in the centre of that, who's going, the law says use the women's toilet because I'm biologically female, even though I exist as a man in my own world. But now if I go to the women's, they can say, no, you look like a man, can you leave?
I don't think we're going to solve this, and we're going to run out of time. But
the biggest beneficiaries of this are going to be lawyers, essentially.
All right.
Yep.
Can we move on? A lot of people be off to the seaside this weekend. A lot of people might be at the seaside right now. And here's a little warning for you. So Rupert Lowe famously was elected as a Reform UK MP, and a massive fallout with the party, is now independent, put a tweet when he was in Great Yarmouth this week where he noticed something in the sea over there, and he referred to it as a dinghy with migrants coming in. He was convinced it was, but it turns out, in actual fact, it wasn't. It was actually a rowing boat, a charity rowing boat by the MND charity, a team of 4 who are attempting to row from Land's End to John O'Groats. I mean, what was he thinking, Salma?
Yeah.
I mean, there's become a bit of a fashion, hasn't there, for politicians to go and be out in an expanse of water searching for migrants on dinghies. And I think this is sort of testament to the problem, which is you can't just sort of turn up at the
MND
seaside.
charity wins because Rupert Lowe has tweeted, good news, false alarm.
Is he
the
gonna
unknown
donate?
vessel was charity rowers, thank goodness. And well done to the crew, he says. I've donated £1,000 to their charity.
Actually, fair dues to Rupert Lowe then. Fair dues. He owned his error.
He bought his way out of the...
It's this obsession with these migrant boats that leads to sort of calling out any dinghy that you see in the sea, that must be migrants.
I think, so to answer your question, what was he thinking? I think Rupert Lowe was thinking like Rupert Lowe thinks, which is often, far too often, in crass, stereotypical terms. And I think that the danger, but what it reflects is that you shouldn't be so swift to judge something for what you actually see it, for what you see there. And I think it's I think it reflects a broader situation that, over there too. Please.
We must just end on this remarkable, wonderful video of good things happening to good people.
This is lovely.
Who really deserve a bit of good news. This is a lottery winner revealing to his son, Paul Harvey, what has just occurred. And just to be clear, the dad here has been suffering from cancer.
Here we go.
We're about to. How many years ago? 0. Well, I've got no money. Now, shut up. You're joking. You're joking. You're lying. My life. You're lying. You can't be.
Oh, how
Isn't that absolutely wonderful? For somebody who's been suffering from cancer, raising his 2 lads, and to have that moment filmed, winning £1 million on the lottery.
Absolutely brilliant. It brings tears to your eyes, doesn't it?
It does.
It does indeed.
Salma and Nels, don't go away. Oh, actually, you've got time to go to Canary Wharf, get in this morning. You could be back by 8:45.
A few laps.
I might just do that. There we go.
Still to come, reality TV.